Good morning everyone and welcome to this new video. Today I am going to talk about an author who was not really on the program, but who was asked by several people and is quite complex. I will try to make it as usable, as easy and understandable as possible. I am going to try at least. I will in fact talk about Piaget. Piaget was a very great psychologist, biologist, pedagogue, and also philosopher of the 20th century. He was born in Switzerland in 1896. His father was a historical scholar of medieval literature, while his mother unfortunately suffered from neurosis. And it was in this context that Piaget developed a great interest in psychoanalytic theory. Together with Freud, he is one of the most incisive and most important personalities of the entire 20th century, with regard to precisely his theories of child development. Piaget's first occupation, however, was as a biologist. In fact, he majored in biology, and at first he studied precisely the development of mollusks. But after meeting Simon, who was the inventor of the intelligence test, he became so passionate about this discourse that he decided to standardize this test, which at the time had only been tried and tested on children in Paris. The author became so enthused by studying precisely the intelligence of children that he then spent his entire career investigating precisely the development of child thinking and metacognitive processes. Piaget became the founder of genetic epistemology, which is precisely that concept through which we try to go and investigate knowledge through the development of life stages. He also focuses attention on the concept of intelligence. According to Piaget, in fact, intelligence evolves qualitatively. Intelligence is a form of adaptation for Piaget of humans to the environment and develops through stages and evolutionary stages. According to the author, exchange with the environment occurs through two processes that are fundamental: the process of assimilation and the process of accommodation. Assimilation is that process through which a new piece of data is entered into the child's mind and then assimilated through our senses that perceive it from the environment and then assimilate it from the environment. Whereas accommodation is that process that completes the previous one. That is, the child's mental schemata are accommodated to the environment in some way. That is, first they are assimilated and then they are accommodated. Until then, the structures and schemata that the child already possessed are changed. According to Piaget, therefore, this continuous exchange with the environment through these two processes creates mental schemas. For example, at the moment when you want to make a child grasp an object, the child will try with the schemata he already knows to grasp it, but then he will have to adapt to the fact that perhaps this object has a different grip in order to then really grasp it, and therefore he will have to somehow change the schemata he already possessed in order to precisely grasp the new object. Piaget, in his studies, however, will also be interested in the concept of perception and the concept of memory. Perception in the sense of how we interpret the world through the use of our five senses. On the other hand, memory is that intellectual aspect and the ability to reconstruct the past, a bit like a container in which we then go when we want to dredge up episodes from the past. Piaget, as Freud had done, who distinguished child development into various stages, distinguishes child development into four main states: the sensori-motor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operation stage, and the abstract operation stage. The first, the sensori-motor stage, is the most complex because it is divided into 6 substates. In general, however, it is characterized by direct action and practical action patterns. The first substage is from 0 to 1.5 months of age, and during this period the child's intelligence is such that it is able in some way to respond perceptually to external stimuli. The child has reflex activity and responds to such activity automatically and therefore not mediated by brain capacity. The second substage is from 1.5 to 4 months of age. The child at this stage behaves repetitively according to experience. It learns to respond with averse to various stimuli and becomes accustomed to reality in this way. And this is the period when it begins to form its first habits, such as sucking its thumb. We do not yet speak of true intelligence at this time, since every discovery he makes is always repeated out of habit, and so actions are also repeated out of habit. Between the ages of 4 and 8 months, the child becomes more curious and increasingly intrigued by external stimuli, becomes interested in everything around him, and begins to do things with intention. He begins to coordinate his actions through the two processes we saw earlier, and then assimilation and accommodation, and no longer moves by chance but begins to explore the world. Between 8 and 12 months, on the other hand, new patterns arrive to be applied to new situations, and so the child shifts his learning to these new situations. He begins to understand the space-time relationship, that is, he understands that he needs space to move and begins to solve those first little problems of organizing his little world. Between 12 and 18 months, on the other hand, that phase of active exploration begins, i.e., the child becomes active precisely in order to explore the outside world, and when he discovers a new object, he likes to explore the properties through the enactment of new patterns that result from the evolution of old patterns. In this way, he also discovers new ways to achieve purposes in a different way than before. On the other hand, in the stage from 18 to 24 months, the child invents new means through mental combinations of the schemata. This is the stage of representing objects in symbols, and this will enable the child to distinguish the symbol from the object it represents. So it is the stage where he is also able to get from hands-on play to symbolic play, and also to verbalize little thoughts of things that are not present at that time, but that he may remember seeing the previous day. Then he moves on to the second stage, which is the pre-operational stage. This stage is from 2 to 6, 7 years old and is the stage where symbolic thinking really develops, and then the child mentally represents all objects. Symbolic representation, however, develops progressively in that, for example, a child uses a toy until he is 4 or 5 years old in one way and then in another way. For example, a doll. Until the age of 4, the child will tend to cradle it. From 4 or 5 years old onwards, on the other hand, the play will change and will be more elaborate and put in pretend play, such as mother and child. And this is called the imitation stage. From ages 6, 7 to 12, there is the stage of concrete operations. In this stage, the child acquires skills in ordering and classifying objects by means of criteria. One acquires new notions of time, space, and number that one did not have before, and thus begins to do real operations. From here on, the child will then be able to perform logical but concrete actions. So adding, subtracting, dividing, classifying objects. So all operations based always on tangible data. Then it goes to the last stage, which is abstract operations. It goes from 11 to 12 years old, and the child at this stage begins to make mental hypotheses and make real connections between events. Hypothetical, deductive, logical, abstract, and flexible thinking is then developed. And all these formal operations are then applied by the child to the various situations in which he or she finds himself or herself. According to Piaget, these states are progressive and successive to each other, and the transition from one state to another depends on many factors, mainly 4. One is physical maturation, another is the experience the child will have with all the external objects and stimuli he will encounter. Another is the social experience, and another is the balancing according to which the continuous adaptation that there is between assimilation and accommodation always generates new balances. Well, for today, I have finished this brief explanation on Piaget. If you have any doubts or questions, you can also write them to me below. I salute you and thank you for your attention. See you in the next video.